Nobody wants to hear about Elvis Presley. That's just baby boomer, just tacky 60s cornball music. Nobody wants to hear that. The trouble with that is everything that we know about a rock and roll star, Elvis Presley practically invented it. And not just being a rock and roll star, he was a crossover dude. He was doing movies. It wasn't just rock and roll. If he wanted to do a gospel album, he did it. He might do a country album. Might do the rock and roll. He might do an album full of ballads. He did anything he wanted. He was Elvis Presley. That's in part why trashing hotel rooms, Elvis Presley invented it, baby. There's a great book on the subject of Elvis. 2 books, actually. It's like a part 1, part 2, and they are all inclusive. The first one is called Last Train to Memphis, and the second one is called Careless Love, The Unmaking of Elvis Presley. A guy named Peter Guralnick wrote them. I recommend them if you're interested in the music business at all, or Elvis, or stardom, I guess. I mean, these are really good books, really well-written books. I'll skip the humble beginnings and the poor parents and all that stuff. It's all documented history. Prior to Elvis, the only thing like the common everyday people like me and you knew about stardom was Hollywood. And you didn't know much other than what the newsreels gave you. And Elvis revolutionized all that. And we're going to go here from after stardom. You know, you have to keep in mind, this is a super young guy, probably one of the most handsome guys that ever lived. No homo, but I mean, he's a sharp-looking guy. No problem getting the girls, and girls went nuts. Before the Beatles and the screaming girls and just fainting and oh my goodness. Before that, Elvis led the way. That's where that started from. Well, he goes in the military and somebody starts feeding him speed, amphetamines. Now we got a pill problem. So he came back and the career's going now, the train to the top. And sky was the limit. And he couldn't go out during the day because it would just cause an absolute commotion. I mean, traffic jams, and it was a legitimate safety hazard. Not only for the fans, but for himself. So they went out at night. He was already an insomniac. Well, now he's eating amphetamines. So there's no sleep till forever, for this bunch. And he had all his lackeys, what they called the Memphis Mafia, some of them bodyguards, quote unquote, bunch of distant relatives, hangers-on. It's a Southern thing. And the girls. And it started, the big thing was, they couldn't go to the carnival. He was still young enough, I guess, and had lived a childhood of poverty. They never could afford to go to a carnival or county fair or anything like that. So Elvis rented out the entire fairgrounds, all of it, all the rides, everything. And they'd go about midnight, and it's all night. Speed and Ferris wheels. I mean, and all the rides you could ride, and the cotton candy and the whole shebang, and they're having a blast. Then it became flag football. He would get on these kicks where like everything you could possibly know about a subject, he would learn it through books and from talking to people and get all into it. And just like, if I could snap my fingers, well, I would do it here. Just like, bam, it'd just be over. Or his manager put a stop to it. But the flag football thing, he's calling college and professional teams wanting their scouting tapes and their schemes and stuff. They're drawing up plays because none of them's ever sleeping. It became a thing. Flag football. The most giving entertainer possibly that ever lived. I mean, he'd give away cars, he'd give away jewelry, he'd give away money. He didn't really care, and all he had to do was make more of it. And it became a problem later in life. We're still getting to that, but time being, it practically grew on trees. Then he crossed over to the movies, and those movies, for my money's worth, are horrible. I tried to watch one time, and they're just awful. Plus, he's all jacked up on speed, so his lines are racing. He wasn't an actor. They put him in the movies. He's making money. And his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, who was not a colonel, and in the country illegally, and probably a tax dodge, and had a horrific gambling problem. But anyway, he took 50% of everything, of all the money that came in to Elvis Presley. Colonel Tom Parker took half of it. But they had this weird dynamic thing where Elvis, anytime it came to talk about maybe getting rid of Colonel Tom, well, no, we came up together. He made me famous. There was a Southern loyalty thing there, and he never parted ways with Tom Parker, to possibly his detriment. A lifetime of fiasco, basically, is what it amounted to. Endless women and movie stars, and while he's married to his bride that he met when she was 14, he met her when he was in the military. I think they waited to get married, but I mean, stuff like that now, at least in theory, it should get you in prison. You're like a pedo. Well, not Elvis. Private jet airplane for himself to go anywhere at any time. He might fly to Denver in the middle of the night to go get a peanut butter and banana sandwich because they were better there. I mean, he just didn't care. Nobody had ever seen anything like this. Nobody had ever tried anything like this. He went to the White House and requested and received a meeting with then President Richard Nixon. He's bombed out of his mind. He's all jacked out on dope to talk to Nixon about the drug culture in the youth, and it was a problem. And Mr. President, what are you going to do about it? Are you on top of this? What? I don't understand. But he did it, and he got the meeting. When you're the king of rock and roll, you and I, if we're going to meet the king, we don't have him over coffee. We go to the castle, the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, the big, big bands of the time. If they wanted to meet Elvis, they went to Graceland, his home, his mansion that he bought. You go pay your respects to the king. Stardom like nobody had ever known before that. Then came the cowboy kick. It started out, he bought his wife a horse, a pony, for Christmas. Well, then she had to ride by herself, so he gets a pony. Now they can go ride. Oh, they're people. So they get some of the bodyguards' horses. Pretty soon, everybody's got to get a horse. Well, there's not enough room on the grounds for horse. He bought a 160-acre ranch, I think, in Mississippi or something. Bought them all trailer houses to put out there. Bought them all pickup trucks. And all of a sudden, they're all cowboys. And nobody knew nothing about nothing. And nobody's getting any sleep. Because amphetamines. And then Colonel Parker got wind of it. His manager. This costing too much money. Put a stop to it. And boom, everything gets sold. And that happened over and over and over. Oddly enough, Elvis never wrote a single song in his life, not one. He could barely play a guitar, and he could kind of sort of plunk around on piano. Not exactly a top musician, and certainly not a songwriter. But the deal was, if you wrote a song, and that's where the money's at in music, is touring, merchandise, concert ticket sales, and publishing. Then now you're getting the royalties for your song being used or printed or played on the radio. That's where the money's at in the music business. If you wrote a song, Elvis wanted to record that song, you had to sign away your entire rights in any way, shape, or form to Elvis Presley. All of it. And of course, Tom Parker gets half. So he made a pretty darn good living, considering he never wrote a song. Now singing, man could sing the phone book and make it sound good. And there are tales in that book of mind you too, this is before auto-tune, where you could just cut out a bad note, and clip in the new one, or pitch correction. You just kind of fix it, make it where it needs to go. Wasn't none of that. Now we're talking late 50s, all of the 60s, in the early 70s. So you did a song as a singer in its entirety. And Elvis might do 30 takes or 40 takes. And everybody's just, can we just move on, man? I think I can get it. I think I can do better than that. And in a couple of counts at 72 takes, he'd nail it. Nobody'd ever seen anything like Elvis Presley. Nobody'd ever seen anything like Elvis. Nobody was ever as big a star as Elvis, even comparatively, probably to and including modern day. I mean, he was just a phenomenon. The trouble with that is nobody ever got to tell him no. So all this fast living and all these drugs, and you taking drugs to get up, and then pretty soon he's got to take more drugs to be able to get some kind of sleep. And that became a whole thing, the downers, the depressants, and then it became pharmaceutical. He had his own doctor. Or he's, oh, such and such is bothering me. You know, I need a script. He didn't look at his drug use because he had a prescription. This is legitimate pharmaceutical needs here. Well, that did not end up so well. At the time of his death, which, for the record, it's probably common knowledge, he died on the toilet, reading a book about the relationship between constellations and cosmic things and sexual positions. A little bit of a freak, and by a little bit, I mean totally. And he's straining on the commode, and that was it. Basically had a massive heart attack, I think, falls face first into the shag carpet. And that was it. Done. At 42 years old. Because nobody could tell him no. Well, what are you going to do? Tell Elvis, you know, no, you're getting a little over your head here and you need the back. I'll replace you. I'll get new friends. I'll get a new manager. I'm Elvis Presley. You're going to tell me no? Well, it ends up costing him. It's his own decisions. Ultimately, he liked being Elvis Presley. But there's a lot of boredom, and there's a lot of hours in a day when you're awake for all of them. So he had to find things to do. Motorcycles, race cars, girls, drugs, you name it. He's looking into it, and by looking in, I mean all in. The books are remarkable. There's all kinds of information on Elvis you can look into yourself if you have a mind to. There's some fascinating, interesting stuff, and I'm leaving out of time, man. You put your comments in the thingy if you want to. I do appreciate your time. I will see you next time.